Jacob Rees Mogg, if I just turn to you and put Fran Hall's original point to you, that what she did not hear was sorry.
Well, first of all, can I say to Fran Hall how sorry I am about the bereavement that she had, that is at the heart of the tragedy that has been COVID. And it is very much what the Prime Minister said this morning, that he understood why people were so angry with what had happened. Their rage, I think, was the word. But he did apologise. He opened his statement by saying, I want to apologise to the House and to the country. And so I think he has apologised. He was right to do so, because, as he said himself, with hindsight, this is not what he would have done. And he has given an apology. But I think his leadership during this period of COVID has been exceptional and has seen the country through one of the hardest times in its most recent history.
Let me quote some Tory MPs for you after Prime Minister's questions. Neil Hudson, I will not defend the indefensible. William Ragg, a series of unforced errors on matters of integrity. Now, these are deeply damaging from your own backbenches.
Well, there are many people who haven't been admirers of the Prime Minister over an extended period.
That doesn't
within
excuse
any,
it, does it?
In terms of, can you find a Tory MP who will say something disobliging about the leader of the party, you can always do that. Indeed, you used to call upon me regularly to do this about Lady May, as she now is. So I don't think finding a couple of Tory MPs, mainly who have opposed the Prime Minister. You had my very old friend Simon Hoare on. Simon Hoare has disliked Boris Johnson forever and was very disappointed with the Brexit result. So you can, of course, find people in the Tory party who will be rude about the leader of the Tory party.
And we'll come on to some.
It was ever thus.
And we'll come on to more substantial criticisms in a moment. But can I just ask a very basic question? Exactly what was Boris Johnson apologising for?
Well, he was apologising for the reports that there have been of what went on the 20th of May 2020, which is being investigated by Sue Gray. He was being very careful not to preempt the investigation, but to say that, look, he's seen what it looks like, he has seen the reports, and that with hindsight, it is not what he would have done. So that's what he was apologising for.
So let's be clear. On the 20th of May last year, he spent 25 minutes outside a BYOB party with Carrie Symonds was there as well. And what he said at Westminster today was he accepts that he should have brought the people, the 30 people, back inside. But if it was a work party, there was no need to bring them back inside. They could quite happily be outside. Well, so I don't understand that.
What he has said is that he has apologised for what happened because he said quite clearly that though it may have been within the technical rules, it was not the right thing to be doing. And you posed the question at the very beginning of the programme of was this a sincere apology? I was sitting one seat away from him, and it was the apology of a man who feels very humble about what has happened, and his body language was one of the deepest sincerity, sitting from very close to where he was speaking.
It wasn't the body language of someone who thinks he's about to be toast.
No, it wasn't. It was somebody who was apologising because, as he said, with hindsight, he regretted what had happened. But I do think it's important to look at the leadership he's given during COVID, that he has managed to get the big calls right again and again to the huge benefit of the country, whether that was not locking down before Christmas, was opening up during the summer when lots of people were telling him that this was the wrong thing to do, about the vaccine programme. He has provided the country with the leadership it needed in a difficult period.
But these then, if that is the case, then these then were unforced errors or whatever that really weren't needed to be made. And he had civil servants around him who could have actually maybe provided a kind of leitmotif of how to behave or not. But I want to just go back to this idea that it was a work party. When was the last time that you took a bottle of booze to a work party?
Well, a work party.
Yeah, but this was work party. Yes. Boris Johnson said.
I used to work in the city in the early 1990s when wine was regularly provided almost everything that happened. So it depends on your time perspective. But I don't think that's the point. I think the Prime Minister has apologised for what happened, said with hindsight it shouldn't have done. But that you do need to look at his overall leadership, because if you think we've been in this pandemic for what, nearly 700 days, around 700 days, and what we are quibbling about is a very brief period, 25 minutes, and the Prime Minister said that he regrets what happened then. An inquiry is being carried out. And bear in mind, this Prime Minister almost died during the pandemic.
Yes, exactly. He almost died during the pandemic. He praised the NHS. And 5 weeks later, he's at a party thinking it was okay to be with other people in such close proximity.
He praised the NHS that saved his life.
Yeah, let me ask you, because of course YouGov have just produced a poll to say the Conservatives are 5 points down. Do you understand that some people don't necessarily think that members of the government take this seriously enough? You yourself said Conservative MPs don't need to wear masks during debates because they know each other. There is no medical reason for that.
The rules at the time were that you didn't need to wear a mask with people you met regularly.
But you also were filmed this Christmas making jokes about the allegations of Christmas parties last Christmas. Do you want to apologise for that?
No, what I was saying then was that how good it was that we didn't have restrictions at Christmas, and how nice it was that we were now able to have parties legitimately. And people do sometimes wish to take the tiniest fragments and put them on social media to try and pretend people said things that they haven't.
But actually, for very many people, this is a very serious matter. Not least your Scottish contingent of Conservative MSPs. Now, you have already said today that the Scottish Tory leader, who's both an MSP and an MP, Douglas Ross, you don't think is a big figure in the Conservative Party. Tonight, we have been told that every single Scottish Tory MSP, that's 31 of them, the people that you depend on to hold up the union, think that Boris Johnson should quit. That, I would suggest to you, is a very serious matter. Well,
I would actually say that the Secretary of State for Scotland, who is a big figure, is very supportive of the Prime Minister, has made that absolutely clear. Douglas Ross has always been quite a lightweight figure, so I don't think that his...
So hang on. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, an MSP and an MP is a lightweight figure.
I think the Scottish Secretary is a much more substantial and important figure in this.
Scottish MSPs.
You're reporting this without them actually having said this. Some of them they need to say this publicly. If that's
well, we have been told by a very senior Scottish MSP.
Okay, I think though these sorts of anonymous briefings are not necessarily entirely reliable. But I want to come back to your point about how serious this is, because the Prime Minister absolutely recognised that in what he said today. And to go back to Fran Hall, nobody can hear her without feeling sympathy and the pain that people suffered. And that's why we had the restrictions that we had. Now, whether all the restrictions were the right restrictions is something that the inquiry, when it comes, will have to look into, whether it was all proportionate. But people did do their best in very difficult circumstances. And that was what the Prime Minister was saying at the dispatch box. He understood how upset people were. That's why he has apologised. Now,
today, William Ragg, who I mentioned earlier, also said that Boris Johnson could resign because it should not be down to a civil servant to decide the fate of a Prime Minister. Do you agree with that?
Well, the civil servant will not determine the fate. She will produce a report. These two things are different. But the civil servant is, of course, independent of political control. It's very relevant to bear in mind how our Constitution works, that people have said that the Prime Minister is the boss of a civil servant. He's not. The civil service are independent of political control and report to other civil servants, and it's important to understand that.
Yes. So after that, she produces a report, and it may indeed be down to Boris Johnson to look at that report and make a judgment about whether he's broken the ministerial code. And 6% of people in a Times poll think that he is actually to be believed.
I think there's a lot of agreement that it is the electorate who determines who their politicians are. The Prime Minister won a majority of 80 in December 2019. He commands confidence in the House of Commons. That is the correct constitutional position. He retains the overwhelming confidence, the unanimous confidence of the Cabinet, and you've seen that today.
It took Rishi Sunak till 8:30 tonight to say that he was glad that he'd apologised, and that was all he said.
Well, he had a busy day, did the Chancellor.
So he couldn't have actually mentioned that earlier?
He was visiting somewhere in North Devon that was important for him.
Just a final question here. Should a single civil servant take the rap for this if it comes to it, if Boris Johnson doesn't have to?
What will happen in relation to Sue Gray's report is not something that we know, that we will have to wait and see what she says with evidence. It's really important to act on evidence. That's the fair and proper way to do things, and I'm sure that Sue Gray's report will reveal important facts for people to consider.
Jacob Rees Mogg, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.